The air crackles with anticipation. In the autumn of 218 BC, a Carthaginian army, led by a man whose name would forever echo through Roman nightmares, stands poised at the foot of the Alps. Hannibal Barca, his goal, to strike at the heart of Rome by doing the unthinkable, crossing the treacherous, snow-choked passes with tens of thousands of soldiers and war elephants. This is not just a story of a military campaign. This is a descent into a psychological hell, a brutal test of human endurance against the unforgiving power of nature and the crushing weight of the impossible. The ghosts of Hannibal's recent victory at the Trebia River march with them, a chilling reminder of Rome's vulnerability and the bloody price of defiance. But the Alps are a different kind of enemy. Imagine the scene, a vast, jagged wall of rock and ice stretching as far as the eye can see. For Hannibal's multinational army, seasoned Numidian cavalry, fierce Iberian infantry, and Gaulish allies, this was an alien world. They were used to sun-baked plains and familiar forests, not the thin biting air and treacherous, snow-covered slopes where one wrong step meant a plunge into the abyss. The initial ascent is deceptively challenging. The paths are narrow, often no wider than a mule track, winding precariously along cliff faces. The soldiers, burdened with armor and supplies, struggle for every breath in the increasingly thin atmosphere. The silence is broken only by the crunch of boots on loose gree, the nervous calls of men trying to keep their footing, and the distant, echoing roar of avalanches, nature's ominous warnings. Fear begins to take root, not just the fear of the unknown, but the primal terror of being utterly exposed and insignificant against the monumental scale of the mountains. Doubts whisper through the ranks. Can they really do this? Is Hannibal leading them to certain death? The whispers are fueled by the memories of the Trebia, where thousands of their comrades fell. Victory was sweet, but the cost was heavy, and the grim reality of war is a constant companion. The first casualties are not from Roman swords, but from the mountain itself. Falls from icy paths, rock slides triggered by clumsy steps, the insidious onset of altitude sickness. Each loss chips away at the army's morale, adding to the psychological burden. They came for glory and plunder, not to be swallowed by a frozen wasteland. Hannibal, a master of psychological warfare as much as battlefield tactics, understands the growing unease. He rides among his men, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the rising panic around him. He speaks of Rome's weakness, of the rich lands that await them on the other side, painting a vivid picture of the rewards that outweigh the current suffering. But even his legendary charisma can only do so much against the relentless assault of the Alps. That the true test is yet to come. The higher they climb, the more hostile the environment becomes. The whispers of doubt will soon turn into screams of desperation. The ghosts of the Trebia will be joined by new, more terrifying specters, the ghosts of the mountain itself. The mountain is not just rock and ice. It has a voice. It has eyes. As Hannibal's army climbs higher, leaving the familiar world behind, they enter the domain of the Allobroges and other local mountain tribes. These are not the organized legions of Rome. They are men born of the mountains, as hard and unforgiving as the granite they inhabit. For them, Hannibal's army is not a force to be feared, but a prize to be taken. A long, slow-moving serpent, of men and animals, laden with supplies, ripe for the picking. The first attack is a masterpiece of guerrilla warfare. It comes without warning. From the cliffs above, a hailstorm of boulders and rocks rains down upon the narrow path. The tightly packed column of soldiers and pack animals erupts into chaos. Men scream as they are crushed or swept off the precipice. The war elephants, terrified by the noise and confusion, become uncontrollable, their immense bodies thrashing and creating even more devastation in the confined space. This is a new kind of psychological terror. The enemy is unseen, a ghost that strikes from the clouds. Every overhanging cliff, every narrow gorge now feels like an ambush site. The soldiers' fear of the mountain's indifference is replaced by a sharp, paranoid terror of its inhabitants. Trust evaporates. The Gaulish guides hired to lead them are now viewed with suspicion. Are they leading them to safety or into a trap? Hannibal is forced to make a terrible choice. He splits his forces, taking a light contingent to secure a strategic pass overnight. It's a brutal, freezing night spent in the open, on high ground. A sleepless vigil where the wind bites like a physical blow. They are exposed, vulnerable, but his presence prevents a larger ambush. He saves the army, but the cost is paid in the frostbitten limbs and shattered morale of his best men. The physical toll is now matched by a relentless psychological attrition. Starvation begins to set in. The supplies lost in the ambush are irreplaceable. The men begin to slaughter the pack animals for food, a desperate measure that slows them down even further. Hunger gnaws at them, clouding their judgment, turning allies into rivals over a scrap of stale bread. And then comes the snow. Not a gentle dusting, but a thick, wet blanket that covers everything. It conceals treacherous crevasses, turns familiar landmarks into a white, featureless void, and seeps into their clothes, chilling them to the bone. The path forward is now erased. They are lost, not just geographically, but mentally. Hope, which had flickered with every upward step, is now buried under the suffocating whiteness. They are no longer an army. They are a scattered column of survivors, fighting a war on three fronts: against the guerrilla tactics of the tribes, against a gnawing hunger in their bellies, and against the crushing, silent despair of the endless snow. The serpent has been bitten, its venomous wounds slowing it to a crawl. And the summit, the supposed gateway to victory, is still nowhere in sight. There is a point in every descent into hell where the initial shock wears off, replaced by a chilling, monotonous reality. For Hannibal's army, trapped in the snow-choked upper reaches of the Alps, that reality was white, silent, and unending. The ambushes had ceased. The mountain tribes had retreated to their valleys, leaving the Carthaginians to their fate. Now, the army faced its purest enemy, the mountain itself, in its most lethal form, the White Death. The descent was a crueler trap than the ascent. The northern slopes, shielded from the sun, held a deeper, more treacherous layer of ice beneath. The fresh snow, the paths that had been difficult to climb were now almost impossible to descend. Men and animals slipped constantly, their desperate struggles only serving to create slick, icy slides for those behind them. A single misstep would send a soldier or a mule cartwheeling into the abyss, their screams swallowed by the vast, indifferent silence. The elephants, symbols of Carthaginian power, were now a liability. Their massive weight broke through the icy crust of the snow, leaving them floundering and trapped. The surviving beasts, gaunt and maddened by hunger and cold, let out mournful cries that echoed across the desolate landscape, a funeral dirge for an army dying on its feet. This is where the human mind begins to truly break. The physical exhaustion is absolute, but it's the psychological erosion that kills the soul. Hope is a distant memory. The promise of Italy's riches feels like a cruel joke whispered in a dream. The only reality is the next agonizing step, the gnawing emptiness in the stomach, and the sight of your comrades falling one by one, their bodies left behind to be entombed in the snow. A terrible lethargy sets in. The desire to simply lie down, to close one's eyes and let the cold take over, becomes a seductive temptation. It's a fight not just against the elements, but against the voice in your own head telling you to give up. Men watch as friends they've fought beside for years surrender to this silent killer, their faces peaceful as they freeze, becoming part of the mountain. Hannibal, witnessing his army disintegrating before his eyes, is forced to perform his most legendary act of leadership. He finds a vantage point, a place where, for the first time, the haze breaks, and there, far below, shimmering in the distance, is the green, fertile plain of the Po Valley. Italy. He gathers his senior officers, the skeletal, frostbitten remnants of his command. He points. He doesn't need to shout. His gesture is enough. For the first time in days, the men see not just a wall of white, but a destination. A promise. It is a psychological masterstroke. He isn't just showing them land. He is showing them that their suffering has a purpose, that the end of their ordeal is within reach. A flicker of hope is rekindled. It's not a roaring fire, but a tiny, fragile ember in the hearts of dying men. It might not be enough to save them all, but it is enough to make them take that next step. And the next. The White Death still surrounds them, but now, for the first time, they can see the shore beyond the frozen ocean. Hope is a powerful fuel, but it cannot mend broken bodies or resurrect the dead. The final leg of the descent from the Alps is a slow, agonizing crawl. The sight of Italy gives them a direction, but every step is a testament to the price they have paid. They are no longer a proud, conquering army. They are a procession of ghosts, skeletal figures wrapped in rags, limping out of a white hell and into the green world of the living. When they finally reach the plains of northern Italy, the transformation is shocking. The survivors, surrounded by lush grasslands and flowing rivers, look like creatures from another world. They have been forged in a crucible of ice and despair, and it shows in their hollow eyes and gaunt frames. Of the nearly 60,000 men who started the journey from Spain, fewer than 26,000 now remain. Half of the army has been devoured by the mountains. Of the 37 war elephants that began the ascent, only a handful have survived. The physical cost is staggering, but the psychological cost is immeasurable. These men are not the same soldiers who celebrated victory at the Trebia. They are bound by a shared trauma, a collective memory of horrors that no one else can understand. They have seen friends crushed by rocks, swallowed by crevasses, and frozen solid in the snow. They have starved, they have despaired, and they have been pushed to the absolute limit of human endurance. This shared hell, however, becomes the source of their greatest strength. It forges an unbreakable bond between them and an unshakable loyalty to the commander who led them through it. They have faced the worst the world could throw at them and survived. What Roman legion could possibly be more terrifying than the White Death they just conquered? This is the ultimate psychological alchemy of Hannibal's leadership. He took a disparate group of mercenaries and allies, shattered them against the anvil of the Alps, and reforged them into something new. A hardened, fanatically loyal force that would go on to terrorize Rome for more than a decade. They were no longer fighting for plunder or glory. They were fighting for the man who had shared their suffering, and for the brothers who had survived alongside them. The march across the Alps was not just a means to an end. It was the creation myth of Hannibal's army. They left tens of thousands of ghosts in the snow-choked passes, but the men who emerged were more than just soldiers. They were survivors. And a survivor, with nothing left to lose, is the most dangerous enemy of all. The psychological hell of the mountains was over, but for Rome the nightmare was just beginning.
Hannibal's army escaped the white hell of the Alps, but in the heart of Rome, another hell was being built every day, more organized, more spectacular, the Colosseum. We all know the gladiator on the sand, the man who fought and died. But what about the men behind the curtain? The ones who designed the bloody spectacle, who decided which beast would tear which man apart, who were the invisible impresarios who profited from death and ran the greatest show in the empire. In our next video, we go behind the blood don't meet, the men who ran the Colosseum's death machine. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it.